All right, now let's start talking about some of that dry information that needs to be internalized. Stick with me. I promise it'll get more exciting. I promise it'll get better. First thing that we need to cover, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to comment out this console.log line by highlighting it and hitting Control or Command if you're on a Mac and /, Control / or Command /. Notice that this is what constitutes a comment in JavaScript. 2 / at the beginning of a line and nothing at the end of the line. Okay, so if I just write this is a comment, jump to the beginning, 2 / will comment it out. Okay, just good to know. The first thing that we should cover, though, is JavaScript's primitive data types, of which there are 5. The most important of these are actually the first 3, and number 1 is numbers. Okay, now this primitive data type should be fairly self-explanatory. It's numbers like 8, numbers like 100, numbers like 5.379, or even numbers like -1. Numbers can be negative, they can be decimal, they can be anything that has a numeric value. It can be 0. Anything that has a numeric value is a number. It does not have to be a whole integer or anything like that. Numbers. Second one is strings. Now, strings are content which the browser reads as text. And the way we indicate a string is by using quotation marks. So for example, when I wrote connected inside my console.log up at the top, that is a string. That's a string because of those quotation marks. And being a string, that means that the browser reads this as raw text. That's all that means. Strings can be multiple words. This is a string. Strings can be 1 letter. Strings can be empty. Strings can contain numbers. And that's a really important consideration. Numbers, which are wrapped in quotation marks, will be read as strings. They will not be read as a numeric data type. Okay, that is very, very important, because if you are running some kind of code that requires the number that a user has input to your page to be interpreted as a number, maybe you want to perform some kind of addition to it or arithmetic of any kind, that needs to be a numeric data type. And if it is instead interpreted as a string, something completely different and probably unexpected will happen. And I'll demonstrate what that would look like in a little bit. Okay, but these are strings. Anything wrapped in quotation marks is a string. Raw text can have spaces, multiple words, can have special characters like commas, question marks, exclamation marks, anything like that. Single letter, an empty string. You can have an empty string. And a number contained in quotation marks is also a string. Okay, number 3. Booleans. Now, Booleans are simply true or false. No other options. Booleans are binary data types that are either true or false. That's it. Nothing in between, no exceptions. True or false. The reason why Booleans are important is because we use true and false based logic constantly in JavaScript. Boolean Boolean logic is what drives much of JavaScript's functionality and capabilities in the hands of a developer. We'll see plenty of examples of that, but just keep that in the back of your mind. And then numbers 4 and 5 are null and undefined. I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining these right now. Suffice to say that they both mean nothing. You will typically see undefined when you have an error. That is not always the case, but at this stage, if you see undefined returned in the console or printed in your web page, you probably have an error in your code somewhere. Whereas null also means nothing, but works a little differently in that you have to determine whether or not something is null beforehand. Okay, so don't worry about these just yet. Just remember that they both indicate nothing, and undefined typically points to an error in your code. Okay, so those are the 5 JavaScript primitive data types: numbers, strings, Booleans, null, and undefined. The first 3 are by far the most important right now.